Good morning and welcome to North Carolina. It is a beautiful day today in North Carolina. And today I want to talk about my Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens. I've had this lens for over 3 years and I absolutely want to talk about why I bought it and how I use it as a wildlife photographer. So come along and enjoy this event. Well, let me talk to you about why I bought this lens before I talk about how I use it. Now, when I first got into bird photography, the first thing I bought was a Canon Rebel and a kit lens. And the kit lens just will not work for bird photography. It's just not powerful enough. It doesn't have enough focal length. It's just not going to work for you. So what I ended up doing was buying in 2015, buying the Canon 100 to 400 millimeter zoom lens. This is the Mach 1, so since then they've come out with the Mach 2, and then they came out with the Canon 100 to 500 millimeter lens. But this was the first one they had. I think I paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,200 for that lens, and these are US dollars, by the way. So, and it was a good lens. One of the problems it had, though, was that the way the zoom worked, it allowed debris to come into the lens, so there was a lot of dust and buildup inside of my lens, and I actually sent it back to Canon to get it fixed. And they were going to charge me more to fix it than it would have cost me to buy a new one. So I decided I was going to buy another lens. And the problem with Canon, and this is one of my biggest frustrations, is that they don't have incremental lenses. They either have, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 lenses or $10,000 lenses. They don't have anything in between, especially at that time. So I found a used 400 millimeter f2.8 lens, which was an incredible lens. It was incredibly fast. It would take pictures almost in pitch black. It really worked well. And I also upgraded the camera to a Canon 5D Mark III, which is a really good camera at the time to use. So those two things worked very well together. The problem was that the Canon 400 millimeter f2.8 weighed 25 pounds. Which meant that I had to use it on a tripod or a monopod all the time. I couldn't physically hold that lens while hand holding it. So it was almost impossible for me to do it. So I ended up being frustrated with that, and I actually took it to Ecuador, and there were a couple of times I actually didn't carry it with me because it was just so heavy. So I decided I needed something that was a little bit different. Now, one thing I liked about the 400 millimeter is when I put an extender on it, I think it was 506 millimeter, which is something I wanted. So Canon still only had the 100 400. They had come out with the Mach 2. But the problem with the Mach 1 and Mach 2 that I didn't like is they had a small lens. The lens was only 76 millimeter, which meant that really restricted how much light was coming into the lens. And the reason why they did that is simply because they wanted a lighter lens. Now, so that brought me to the Sigma and the Tamron. And they're both good lenses. If you have either one of them, they're very good. Now, this lens comes in two models. Sigma 150 to 600 comes in two models, the Contemporary and the Sport. This is the Sport. And the reason why I went with the Sport, even though it cost more money, I paid about $1,600 for this. Now, I did do some research online on how much these lenses cost, and I couldn't really find any place where I could physically buy one, but the prices that I've been seeing are around $2,000 for the Sport. So that's just to give you an idea of how much it costs. Again, $2,000 US dollars. But the reason why I went with the Sport was because it had a bigger lens. So this has 109 millimeter, where the Tamron and the Sigma had at the time, 96 millimeter lenses. I don't know if they've changed since then. The other thing that I liked about this lens is this is water resistant. Both the Tamron and the Sigma at the time were not water resistant. But the number one selling point for me, and this is going to sound really stupid, is this big focus ring. Both the Tamron and the Sigma Contemporary had a really small focus ring. This big focus ring, I love this thing. I can get on something, and if the camera's not focusing, I can just push it with my thumb and focus it. I love that. And the last thing, the reason why I went with this lens, is I can stick this on a docking station and program this lens. If you want to see how that's done, I'm going to leave a link above and a link below to a video I did on that. So that's the reason why I bought this lens. So when I'm photographing birds, I have this camera set up basically to zoomed out 100% away. So 600 millimeters I have it set up. Now this lens has actually 4 settings on it. One is the autofocus, either autofocus on, manual focus, or all. Now, autofocus means that it only autofocuses. Manual focus obviously means that you only manually focus it. And all means that I can take control. So if I'm seeing a bird and the camera's not focusing the way it is, I can take control and zoom in or focus how I want the lens to focus. Like I said just a couple minutes ago, that's one of the main reasons why I bought this lens, is I love that option. The second option is focus distance. Now this is different than focus length. Focus length is like a 600 millimeter. Focus distance is at what distance is the lens focusing. So this has 3 settings. One, focus length from 2.6 meters to 10 meters, or 10 meters to infinity. Now, why would you not have, and the last one is full. So why would you not have it on full all the time? And I do have it on full a lot of the times, but I do change the switch a lot. So like if I'm photographing hummingbirds and I know they're going to be closer than 10 meters from me, not millimeters, meters from me, that I will switch it to 2.6 to 10 meters. And the reason for that is that the lens will not focus any further than 10 meters or any less than 2.6 meters. So that it will focus in that distance faster, especially when you're dealing with a very fast bird like the hummingbird. Now, when I'm in the Smoky Mountain National Park in way on the western coast of North Carolina, I will use the 10 millimeters to infinity. And the reason why is I don't get closer than 10 meters from an elk, because they're a very big animal. They're not very friendly to people, and I don't want to get hurt. So in those situations, that's one way I use to keep my distance. So if I get excited and I'm moving close and my camera's not focusing on something, I know I'm way too close to that elk. So that's where I use that switch. But most of the time, it's on full, where the lens just focuses from 2.6 meters to infinity. The third switch is optical stabilization. I think optical stabilization is one of the most misunderstood aspects of lenses. Optical stabilization means that while you're zooming, there's a device inside the camera. It's kind of like if you took the front tire off a bicycle and you spinned it, and as you're holding on to it, you try to turn it as the wheel is spinning. The energy of the wheel spinning around like this resists you being able to turn it left or right. This is one of the reasons why a bicycle works. The same thing, a device inside your lens still occurs just like this. And just be aware, it takes about a second for this device to come online and start running. After that, it works fine. So if you're taking pictures of birds, when I use back button focus, I zoom, and when I hit that back button focus, I can actually hear or feel the optical stabilization kicking in. It takes about a second, but also the camera's focusing, and I know that that's working. And I should probably wait 1 second before taking the pictures. Now, if you're taking landscape photography and you have your lens on a tripod, you should probably turn off optical stabilization. But there are other settings here in optical stabilization. There's 1, and then there's 2. 1 is, Sigma says, for normal photography, and 2 is for panning. Now, I'm assuming normal photography is when I got the camera there and I'm just holding it focused on something and taking pictures. That's 1, and then 2 would be for panning. Now, I don't notice a difference between 1 and 2 in my pictures, and I've done some experimenting with this. But I do notice a big difference between no optical stabilization and some optical stabilization. So if you have it on 1 or 2, I don't think it makes that much difference. To tell you the truth, when I first got the camera, I had it on 1 all the time, and it didn't seem to make any difference at all. But I do leave it on 2. And the last switch on this lens is customization. If you watched last week's video, you know how I programmed those customizations. I did leave a link below to that video. But that's how I use this lens here. I really am happy with this lens. I can't say anything really bad about it. That being said, I can't say anything bad about the 100 to 600 Contemporary or the Tamron lens either. And a matter of fact, my wife has just bought the Canon 100 to 500 millimeter it's actually the same thing, f6.3 lens that I have here. And I gotta tell you, that's a really, really good lens. But I think one of the drawbacks to all those lenses is the size of this lens and how much light it is. I do notice that when I'm photographing with people who have the same camera as I do, but they have the Contemporary or the Tamron, those few little millimeters seem to make a big difference in low light situations. But anyways, that's how I use this lens. That's why I bought this lens and why I am so happy I did buy it. So I'm hoping this video helped you. If you got anything out of it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel because that really helps us in the YouTube world. Become a Patreon supporter. Your support allows us to keep doing this. My name is Leahy, and I want to thank you for watching.